life processes of living things. Let's first of all look at our objectives for this lesson. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to 1. Tell what living things are. Tell what living things are. 2. State 4 life processes of living things. State 4 life processes of living things. So by the end of this lesson, you will be able to tell what living things are, as well as state 4 life processes of living things. Now let's look at what living things are. If you can remember what you were taught in class 1 and 2, what living things are. What are living things? If you look at the environment shown on the screen, you can see a lot of things there. We see houses, we see women cooking, we see someone carrying firewood, a pot on fire, you can see fowls. Which of these are living things? Living things are things that are alive. When we say living things, they are things that are alive. When we say things that are alive, we mean things that have life in them. It means those things can do so many things by themselves. They can move around without any help. They can do a lot of things without any help. So when we say living things, we are talking about things that have life in them, or things that are alive. Let's refresh our minds on what specifically living things are. What living things are. Living things are human beings. Human beings are parts of living things. So when you mention living things, always remember human beings are part of living things. The next living thing is plants. Plants are also living things. Plants are also living things. And the last one to look at is animal. So animals are also living things. Animals are also living things. So when we mention living things, we are talking about human beings, we are talking about plants, we are talking about animals. So if we are going to look at life processes, then we are going to talk about these 3 things on your screen. Human beings, that is you, your family, your brother, your sister, they are all human beings and they are part of living things. We are going to look at plants, we are going to look at animals. So let's go back to this environment and let's try to bring out the living things we see on the screen. So the first one is the dog. But the dog is an animal. So the dog here is a living thing. What next? Yes, the next one are the 2 people here carrying water. The next living thing we can identify here are the 2 women who are pounding. 2 women who are pounding. They are also part of living things. And we see another woman carrying firewood. That woman is also part of living things. We can see fowls here. They are also part of living things. And if you look at the back of the building, we can find trees here. They are also part of living things. So today we are going to look at the life processes of these living things. What these living things go through in their life. That is what we are going to look at. Now, the first life process that living things go through is that living things grow. Living things grow. If you have a table or you have a spoon, I don't believe the spoon will grow and become very big, or the desk that you sit on in the classroom. I don't believe when you move from class 1 to class 2, the desks will grow, because they are not part of living things. But when we talk about living things grow. Let's look at the screen. You see a puppy there. The puppy will eat and then grow into this size, and then grow again into this size, and then grow and finally becomes a very big dog. So if you see the life process of a dog, you see that it started from a puppy, and then the puppy will grow, will eat and grow, will grow into this, and finally into a big dog. So you see that from the example you see on the screen, living things grow. Living things grow. As they eat, they drink water, they move about in life, they change in size and shape, and that is what we call growth. When you change in size and shape, we are talking about growth. And change in size and shape, you'll be becoming bigger than what you used to be. Let's look at another example. You see a baby there, then we grow into a child, and then to an adolescent or teenager, and then we grow into a man, and then from this to an old man and to a very old man. So you see that human beings also grow. When you were a child, you were a very little baby, and you found in your mother's arms. Sometimes your mom will put you at the back and tie you with a cloth. But right now, you have grown into a big boy or a big girl, because as part of the life process of living things, we grow. We don't remain the same as we are when we were born. We grow. So if you look at your mom and then you look at your grandmother, you see that your grandmother is older than your mom. And one day, your mother will also grow to be like your grandmother. You also grow to be like your mother. Living things grow. Let's look at the last example on trees. We normally put a seed in the ground and then water it, and then the seedlings will come. It will grow into a small seedling. It will grow, and then we get a very big tree. So the tree is also a living thing. It starts from a seed, and then it grows gradually into a bigger tree. So one of the life process of living things is that living things grow. They start very young and then grow into a very big shape. Let's look at the second life process of living things. It says living things can move on their own. Living things can move on their own. So if you are a living thing, it means you can move on your own with or without any help. Let's start with human beings. As a baby, you crawl, and it's a form of movement. It's a form of movement. So most babies at a stage can crawl on the floor or on the ground. So living things can move, and an example is the baby crawling. As you grow up, and you become strong. You can run on your own. As you see the boy on the screen running, you can run because you are a living thing. You can also jump. It's also a form of movement. You can also jump, signifying that you are a living thing. And you can also walk, as the woman you see is walking. So this signifies that human beings are living things because they can move on their own. Let's look at animals. You see the dog walking nicely on the screen. The dog is also a living thing, and you see the dog moving nicely. So this means that animals are also part of living things, and as part of their life process, they can move on their own. Let's look at plants or trees. Plants do not move their whole bodies from one place to another, but they can move certain parts of their body. Most especially, if you see what we have on the screen here, plants normally tend towards the direction of sunlight. So you can see that when the sun started shining, the plants moved towards the sunshine. So plants can also move on their own. They don't move their whole bodies, uproot from the ground and then move, but they turn around towards sunlight. So the second life process of living things is that living things can move on their own. Living things can move on their own. And as you see on the screen, you see some movement of living things by humans, by animals, and by plants. Let's look at the third one. Living things need food and water to grow. Living things need food and water to grow. So starting with animals, you see on the screen animals eating. You see animals eating because as a living thing, you need food in order to grow. So you see this chimpanzee busily eating. You see this rabbit also eating. You see lizard also eating. All these living things need food to grow. You see this monkey. This monkey too is enjoying the grass or the leaves because this animal is a living thing. You can see an elephant also. You can see a grass cutter also eating. This means that living things need food in order for them to grow. And if you see the dog by this side, you see that the dog is also taking in water. So living things need food and water to grow. Let's look at human beings. We human beings also eat and drink water to grow. So look at the nice food you have on the screen. I believe most of you enjoy eating fufu. And you see fufu and a glass of water on the screen. This means that we eat in the morning, as we call it breakfast. We eat in the afternoon, as we call it lunch. And we eat in the evening, as we call it supper. Because as part of life process of living things, we need food and water to grow. So human beings also need food and water to grow because we are part of living things. Let's look at trees, also taken as living things. If you look at the roots of the trees here, when it rains, you see that farmers always pray for rains because it will help their plants to grow. and you see that the plant is taking water from the soil. If you can see from below here, you see plant is taking in water, because the plant also need water to grow. Plants also prepare their own food using sunlight, using water, using air, and the air is called carbon dioxide. Plants use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, that is air, to prepare their own food, and they store this food for them to grow. So plants also need food and water to grow, and plants prepare their own food. The food that they prepare is called sugar. They store this in their roots or their stem or their leaves, and they use it to grow. The next life process you talk about is that living things need air to live. Living things need air to live. Humans and animals breathe in and breathe out air. Humans and animals breathe in and breathe out air. Sometimes when you go to school, your teacher will ask you to stand up, breathe in, and then breathe out. Breathe in and then breathe out. We need air as humans and animals to live. When you hold your nostrils like this for a long time, you see that you become uncomfortable, because no air is entering your lungs, as you see on the screen. The organ you see on the screen are called lungs. It is found inside our body that is responsible for taking in air and giving out air. So if you close your nostrils and then air doesn't enter this lung or this organ, you will die. So living things need air to live. And as you see the dog on the screen, the dog is also panting, taking in air and then giving out air. So remember that living things need air to live. If we look at this plant, plant is also a living thing, and plants also need air to live. So if you look at the two arrows there, you see the green arrow moving from the leaf and the red arrow getting into the leaf. The red arrow means that the plant is taking in air, and the green means that the plant is giving out air. Plants also need air to survive. There is a statement that if the last tree dies, the last man dies, because what we give out as air is being taken in by plants, and what plant also gives out as air is also taken in by humans. So plants and animals depend on each other when it comes to air. So remember that living things need air to live. The last life process you look at is that living things reproduce. Living things reproduce. They give birth to young ones. They are able to give birth to young ones, and the young ones looks just like the parent. The young ones look just like the parent. So if you see on your screen, you see a mother holding a baby, and you see that the features of the baby is the same as that of the mother. The baby will grow up and get the same size as the mother. So living things reproduce. That is, they give birth to young ones. If you look at the hen too has given birth to chicks, that is the young ones. And these chicks will grow up to be like the big hen they are following. So animals also give birth to young ones. If you look at the plantain tree that we see, you see that there's a small plant here. This small plant signifies or means that the big plantain has given birth to a young plant, and that young plant will also grow into a big plantain tree. So if you see any plantain farm, or you go into a plantain farm, you will see that under it the big plantain has given birth to young ones, and these young ones will grow up to replace the big ones. Some plants also use seeds to grow. You put the seed in the soil and it will grow into a big plant. So another life process of living things is that living things reproduce. This means they give birth to young ones, and the young ones are just like the parents. So today we looked at life processes of living things. Life processes of living things. Let's look at the summary of our lesson. We said that living things grow. Living things grow. And if you look at the image on the screen, you see the tree growing. That means living things are not, or they do not remain the same as they are. They grow in size and shape. The next one we looked at, that living things eat. They need food and water to grow. They need food and water to grow. Living things also move. Living things also move on their own. So you see the dog moving on its own because there is life in that dog. And then lastly, we looked at living things giving birth to young ones. That is, they reproduce, giving birth to young ones. And the young ones are like the parents. The young ones are the same as the parents. So this is our lesson for today. Life processes of living things. Life processes of living things. And as we said, when we say you are a living thing, it means that you are alive. You have life in you. You can do so many things on your own without or with little help. Let's look at our homework for this lesson. 1. What are living things? What are living things? 2. Write down 4 life processes of living things. Write down 4 life processes of living things. We discussed about 5 life processes. So in this assignment, you are to write down 4 life processes of living things. Children, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Make sure you do your homework and make sure you get everything correct. See you next time. Bye-bye.